Welcome everyone to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham, and on today's episode, we have Dan Domenech, who is the Executive Director for a number of years, the Superintendents Association in the United States, and then has been a superintendent in his career. The conversation, we're gonna dive into a new plan that they've come out with called Learning 2025. I think it'll be incredibly intriguing for all educators to see where the future of education is going. I know that they got thought leaders, educators, as well as educational thought leaders from across the entire country to put this plan together. So I'm excited to learn more about it. So stay with us. If you're not a subscriber already, please hit the subscribe button. We appreciate your support. And so please continue to subscribe and listen to us. Thanks so much. Dan, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you making time for us.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
So the question we start with every guest is, who are you and what do you love about what you do?
So my name is Dan Domenech, and I'm the Executive Director for AASA, the School Superintendents Association. We represent all of the superintendents in America, actually, and also many from Canada and internationally. The superintendents of all the American international schools are members as well. Our organization is probably the oldest K-12 organization in America. We were founded in 1865. That was the year that the Civil War ended and Abraham Lincoln was shot. So we've been around for 166 years now. And we were founded by 7 superintendents who met in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And it was interesting because the reason those superintendents met is because the war had come to an end, and the superintendents were concerned about how our public school system was going to deal with the Black students that were now going to be coming into the system as a result of the end of the Civil War. So equity was really the basis for our foundation, and equity is still our mission. And it's somewhat interesting, perhaps sad, that here we are 166 years later, and that's still a goal to bring equity to our schools. But this past year has been difficult, to say the least, because we've had the pandemic, we've had a great deal of civil unrest, and of course right now our school districts and our superintendents who we work with have had an incredible stressing year. I have to tell you that the turnover this year has been very high. A lot of our folks, great leaders, have really quit. They've resigned, not because they were eligible to retire, but because the stress of the job was just too much for them. Most superintendents are used to that. I was a superintendent for 27 years myself, so I know the stress the job brings. And we've already seen about 1/3 of our school districts around America who have opened for schools are already closing schools, already are having a high number of students that have to be quarantined because they're infected. So we're seeing the problem developing all over again. And we wonder if this coming year is going to be any different. If we're not going to see a return to remote learning, if we're going to see a return to hybrid instruction and all of these issues, simply because there's not a willingness on the part of people to do what the scientists tell us is the solution to correct the problem.
How do you balance, I mean, again, back to my earlier example, my own personal life is having a friend who's superintendent in a small rural area in a conservative state, and then having a friend who's a urban superintendent in a more liberal state. And again, I'm just trying to keep political terms. I usually don't talk politics on here. And so I'm just trying to keep it as in the middle as possible. But
right.
How do you guys in association help balance coaching for each of them? Because
well, the attempt again, and I use the pandemic as an example, is that the recommendation is that they follow what they feel is the best. Now, if that's not going to work, there's little that you can do. Other than the fact to say, well, we're not being allowed to do what's recommended is the best thing, and then look what the result of that is. The result of that is now that we have to shut schools down. The result is that your children can't be in school in person. The result is that your children are getting sick. They're being hospitalized, staff members as well. A non-pandemic issue that's also a major problem today is this whole critical race theory issue. That's also very prevalent in many communities. And here again, our counseling, our superintendents is, first of all, none of these districts, I'm not aware of a single district in America that knows what critical race theory is or pushes it. The idea here is to provide all of our youngsters with the equal opportunity for a quality education. And you pursue that. That has to be, you have to provide all of the students with the same opportunity. You can't allow some students to be marginalized because they're a student of color or because they're immigrant or because they don't speak the language. All of those students need, and superintendents are trying and are willing to do that and continue doing that without getting into a discussion of white supremacy or racism or any of these issues. You want to do the best for every child, regardless of whether they're white, black, brown, yellow, it doesn't matter. Whether they're poor or rich, we want to do the same. So you want to pursue that and not try to get into discussions that are really not going to, as you say, solve the issue. Everybody's going to have different points of view. But if we're all in favor of taking care of our children's needs, absolutely. From the point of view of history, you can't change history. You can't negate what has happened. You can't, say, well, that's not a fact. These are facts, and history is part of the education that youngsters go through. So you try to make sure that they walk the fine line, that they allow all of the voices to be heard, but then in the final analysis, whether it's in terms of the health and safety or the education of children, that what you're doing is that you're trying to do what's best for the child. You're trying to provide the child with the best education that they're entitled to. You're trying to keep the children as safe as they can be given the circumstances. Even so, even doing that, that has not stopped many superintendents this year from being fired, from being removed, or simply for quitting because the pressure is too much. So it's a difficult challenge, and unfortunately, it's going to keep going.
Back to the best worst decision you've ever made, right? So every day is a best worst decision, and so what are you guys doing to help support your great leaders to fight burnout? And then I'm curious to go to that next level. One of my favorite organizations, I went to college in Dallas, Texas, and one of my favorite organizations to study in college and beyond was Southwest Airlines. And it was really about how they treated their people, right? It wasn't about the customer's always right. It's like our people are always right. And so when I got a chance to lead some schools, my heart and passion was take care of the staff to make sure they're loved and served well and can sustain, and that will spread like wildfire to the students. What are you doing for that first line for the soups? And then how are you helping them push that down to their district staff who are in the same place, I'm sure, and then all the way down to the teachers?
Well, that's a great point, and that's exactly right. And what we've done this year is that we have developed and we are bringing superintendents together to deal exactly with the stress of the job, to deal exactly with what they need to do and know in terms of making their life easier. What we found, by the way, is that what works best with our superintendents is that they love the opportunity to come together in groups where it's just them. It's just superintendents. There's nobody else there. There are no staff. There are no board members. There are no parents. It's just the superintendents. And allow them at that point to share their stories, to share the stress that they're facing, and that sharing. And then they talk about, and this is what I'm doing, to help me deal with it. And that kind of sharing is the best. We find that very effective. We bring groups of superintendents together for a period of an hour. And we facilitate a discussion where they get to share, they get to learn from one another, and they want to repeat it. They want to keep doing it. I guess it's a subtle form of therapy. We don't call it that, but it works great. They love it. They love to do that.
It's kind of like being a principal or a soup or just a leader. It's lonely because your whole job is there
Yeah.
and there's no one at your level. So it's tough to be completely vulnerable, to talk about your insecurities or the failings that you may have had that you had, you want to fix. So I do think you're right. The power of that community is probably one of the best things that you can do for your superintendents.
Exactly. It's a lonely job. There's only one superintendent in every community.
Yep.
So the opportunity to get together with other individuals who are facing the same problem is great. Now that in terms then translates to their staff, as you were saying.
Yep.
And many of our superintendents are doing that. They recognize that stress level is also there with their teachers, and many of them have developed and implemented programs in their schools to deal with the teacher stress. And the same thing with teachers, the teacher to teacher, to be able to get together and to share that. And then, of course, the students. And what we're seeing this year that I think is a step in the right direction, part of that commission report and that Learning 2025 initiative that we've developed at AASA, is to focus on the social emotional needs of the students. For a long time, the number one priority in education has been academic. We're here to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, and to make sure that our kids' success. What we're seeing now is a step back from that. Not to say that the academic is not important, but then more important than the academic is the social and emotional well-being of our students. We're seeing that students that are having emotional issues do not perform well in school. That it doesn't matter what you do. You could put them in the best class with the best teacher, and they're not going to learn because their ability to learn is being blocked by emotional issues that they have. So a lot of our superintendents I heard one of them in a video that they did welcoming the teachers back to school saying, the first thing I want you to do when the kids come into the class is not to say, open your book to page 45. The first thing I want you to do is to say, how was your summer? How are you feeling? How are you doing? How is your family? And engage the group in that kind of a conversation before you ever get into the teaching academic mode. That's important. That's an important step because, again, understand that if you're not dealing with the reality that these children have faced, with the problems that they have faced, and give them the opportunity to discuss these things and to ask for help if they need that help, learning is not going to take place. And learning is key right now because no doubt that there's been a significant loss of learning as a result of this pandemic. Consider the fact that this is the third school year that this pandemic is affecting. Third school year. That's a long time. So there's a lot of catching up to be done. And you're not going to do it very effectively if you don't deal with the social and emotional needs of the children. So yes, it cascades down and up, throughout the entire system.
I try to keep a wide variety of friends, and so I can always get in debates. So my dad, who loves his Fox News, probably thinks I'm as liberal as one could be. My mom, who may be on the other side, probably thinks I'm more like Rush Limbaugh, which is not the case. I just like the best debates. And so when I hear you talk about social emotional learning, it speaks to my heart because when I taught in inner city St. Louis, I always felt like if they don't know I love them and care about them, we're not going to go very far, right? So we've got to figure that out. But that was in the height of No Child Left Behind. So we had to get results. What do you say? So there's a couple of thoughts I want to go on this. What do you say to the parents who are nervous, and they're genuinely so? I appreciate their nervousness about social emotional learning because they think, well, that's my job to equip my kids with that. It makes me nervous that the school is going to do that. How do you have a good conversation with them about feeling comfortable about this?
Because the point is to indicate to them that we care about their children. We care about the whole child, not just the academic factor. That's important and that's key. But there's enough science and enough research available to demonstrate that children will not learn. That's been part of the problem with the achievement gap that we have today, and the difference between performance. That we continue. The strategy continues to be to just feed, funnel all this information into the brain of these kids, hoping that they're going to learn it. It hasn't worked. It doesn't work, and it won't work because those children are not ready to learn. And it's not just, by the way, social emotional. Children that come to school hungry because they haven't had breakfast at home and they haven't had dinner at home and they're starving. They're not going to learn. So what we've seen this year is that school districts are feeding all of their kids. I mean, this is great that the federal government has supported this, and we push as an organization hard to do this. But now through this entire school year, all children are going to be eligible for food in the school. Many of us are offering not just lunch, they're offering breakfast as well. And because they recognize that these kids, if they're coming to school hungry, they're not going to learn. So the research today is very definitive on what influences the ability to learn. And clearly, all of these other factors are involved. And if you don't take care of their emotional need, the child that comes to school homeless, the child that comes to school because he's being abused at home, the child that comes to school because there's poverty. And look at this past year, there were 14 million children this year that during the entire year received no instruction whatsoever because they didn't have a laptop. And even if they did, it wouldn't have worked because they didn't have internet access at home. So we've got a lot of children, 14 million of children who missed out an entire school year. Those kids coming back to school as we try to bring them back, there's a lot of catching up to be due. And there are a lot of issues that have to be resolved with these kids before we get to the point of learning the academics.
So let's talk about Learning 2025. Can you tell me what was the genesis of it and kind of how you formed it before we dive into what it is?
Sure. It was a realization that here we are, 2022, we're well into the 21st century. And we have an educational system that still functions as a, not even 20th century, almost 19th century. Okay, all of the things that we do in our school systems are not relevant in our world as we know our world today. And so we have to make major changes. I mean, and they're not complicated. Consider the fact that the old school districts still group kids by grade level based on age. If you're 5 years old, you're in kindergarten. If you're 6 years old, you're in first grade. If you're 7, you're, and up and down the line. When we've known for years that all children of the same age do not learn at the same pace, yet that's how we continue to group them. Consider the format of the school. You, on the average, have a teacher with 25 kids in the class. And those 25 children may all be the same age, but they're all over the place in terms of their ability to learn. Yet teachers will still get in front of the class and try to teach all 25 the same thing at the same time. That doesn't work. It never has, and it doesn't work today. So the move needs to be to ungraded, personalized learning where you're dealing with each child. And by the way, again, going back to the 21st century notion, we can do that today because we have the technology that allows teachers to be able to provide that kind of instruction. This past school year, as much as remote learning was a failure to the extent that school districts were not prepared to do that, that the remote learning is not the best way for children to be educated. But nevertheless, the remote learning showed that it can be a great asset to in-person learning. And there are many districts that are going to continue doing it because that technology does allow for the personalization, the individualizing of learning for each and every student. When we talk about catching up these students, I cringe when I hear politicians say, well, what we need to do is to make sure that every child repeats the grade level that they missed. No, that is an incredible waste of time. What we want to do is to assess where each child is and then move that child forward from where they're at, not have them sit for an entire year listening to many of the things that they've already heard and might very well have mastered. So these are the whole child experience is important. The teacher pipeline, the education pipeline is a critical piece. Our education workforce. Our teachers have to be retrained. We have to get away from the one teacher, we call the sage on the stage, the one teacher in the 25 as being the model, and develop a community of learning where a group of teacher assistant, student teacher, teacher, master teacher, work as a team with a larger group of students, basically engineering and facilitating the learning process. We have to move away with telling kids what they have to learn and allowing kids to say, this is what I want to learn. This is what motivates my learning, and this is what I want to take as I move forward, and giving students a greater responsibility in the learning process. And we have to do away with many of these rules and regulations that keep us doing what we've always done.
Yeah, I have a good friend who's written a book on the future of work and what we do for kids, which is pretty fascinating. So my question for you when it comes to the overall vision for Learning 2025, what are the type of students, like what's the outcome? What's the end product of all of this work that you're trying to do and the vision you're casting?
Yeah, changing the culture is important and being future driven. So for example, I think that everybody in every school district mission will tell you, well, our mission is to get our kids to graduate high school and go to college and get a college degree, right? If I walked into a room full of parents and I would say, how many of you want your children to graduate high school and go to college and get a degree? Every parent will raise their hand. Well, Dustin, the reality is that less than 40%, less than 40% of our students wind up in college with a 4-year degree. What happens to the other 60%? Well, the educational system today is not focusing on that 60%. So we've got a significant number of kids that go out of high school with no preparation, no degree. Even the ones that go to college and get a 4-year degree can't get a job because they haven't developed the skills and the training that they need. So one of the things that we want to focus is in allowing, we talk about children, giving children more of a voice, is making children aware early in the process of the pathways to training and skills and successful jobs. That yes, those students that want to go to a 4-year college and get a degree, they will continue to, that number will still be less than 40. But now we're doing something for the 60% that are not. And that is to provide them with the opportunity early on to pathways that will lead to jobs, skills that will lead to jobs, the kinds of opportunities that will allow these students to be productive and gainful members of our community. We have not done that.
I agree. I think, well, one of my interviews, with a gentleman named Michael Horn recently, I was confessing, and he did the same, that a lot of my education, I spent too much time in my middle school, high school, and even some in college, but I got away from a little bit of just trying to game the system of, I need an A to get to the next step so I can do. There was no love of learning that was inspired in me. I had great teachers, but the system I felt like was very much like I got to learn something to pass something to get a credential. Is there anything baked in here in your Learning 2025 that is trying to help every learner kind of own their own learning and focus on the love of learning versus the just, I'm going to get a test score?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, again, that goes with providing students early on, certainly no later than the freshman year in high school, with making them aware of the opportunities, career awareness, facilitating that process, using assessments, for students that would identify for those students what they might really be good at in terms of the skills they have, and then creating the roadways. But here's where the culture change comes in very often. And we've already started to do that, by the way. Think in terms of apprenticeship programs. For the last couple of years before the pandemic hit, we already in our organization, in partnership with the Department of Labor, had begun doing a lot of work with school districts to create these apprenticeship opportunities where the partnership between the private sector, community colleges, and the high schools in these districts allowed youngsters early on to identify a particular route or pathway or career that they were interested in. And through these apprenticeship programs, and this is just as an example, they would spend 10 hours a week getting paid working for a particular company. They would be taking courses at the community college that were paid for by the business. And by the time they graduated high school, In some cases, some of these students were graduating high school with a community college degree and the high school diploma at the same time. Certification in a particular skill area, okay? The opportunity to continue with their studies if that was what they wanted to do, or to immediately go into a paying job with a corporation. That's a very different model than the traditional school model, yet very effective. The culture change is very often that the parents are the ones that say, no, I want my kid to go to college and get a 4-year degree. And of course, we know that if there were 10 parents in the room that raised their hand, I could easily tell them that's wonderful, but only 4 of you are going to realize that goal. So there's a need to change our culture away from this, everybody is, to go to college and get a degree, which has never been a reality, to, we need to create opportunities for students to be trained in skills. We see it, we hear it from the private sector, right? Who keeps saying we have thousands of jobs and we can't fill them because we don't have the skilled labor to do it. So the jobs are there, the opportunities are there, but our system, our educational system, is not providing the opportunity and the training that will allow those students to realize a better life.
So what's, I mean, again, I know you just are rolling this out as you kind of think about accomplishing this vision, because I've read a few quotes on you and actually reached out to a few folks who have worked with you in the past. And I've not met one person who doesn't stand by the fact that you get stuff done. That's my edited version of it. You want to see execution, you not just talk, you want to see accomplishment. And so what do you see right now as standing in your way of accomplishing this vision that you guys have cast?
Well, we're excited about the fact that we already have over 100 school districts around the country that have signed on to do the work. So, because that's the point here, you mentioned, yes, I like action. I just don't like talking about it. So we have over 100 school districts that have already signed up to move in the direction of doing these things that I'm talking about. I'm working with my fellow executive directors in all these other organizations to team up. For example, in terms of the workforce, we need a more diverse workforce. We need more teachers in the classrooms that look like the kids that they're teaching. That's not the case today. So we're working with higher education, and we're working with the schools of education and the deans of the schools of education with different models to bring that about and make that a reality. We're working with school districts in terms of all of these various opportunities. The training of teachers, it's going to be important to train teachers not to be the individual that sees themselves as getting in front of the class and lecturing, but as the individual that's going to become a director of learning, the individual that's really going to work with each child, assess where each child is at, and then develop a program for each child, a learning program that's different from everybody else in the class. And their job then is to monitor this whole process. Very different strategy. All of these things, though, that are in that report are being done somewhere in America. And those are the districts that we're looking at and identifying. And those are the districts that are going to be working with and partnering with other districts that want to do the same thing. So all of these things that I'm talking about, from non-graded education, personalized learning, creating pathways for all of these students, the social emotional factors, these are all things that are already being done. They're real, they're being done, it's happening. And we want to make sure that this spreads out throughout our school systems in America. So we change from the system that we have today, which goes back to the 19th century. I mean, it was Horace Mann who created the grade level structure that we're still using in the 21st century, to a world that provides all of our students with opportunities. College, for sure. No question that any child that wants to go to college and get a degree, if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, that's your pathway. But the reality is that has never been the case. And we have kind of neglected the larger portion of our students in terms of getting them ready for what can be a better life.
Well, the way you just framed that really speaks to me, because I look at, you spend enough time in urban areas and education, like to just say, yeah, college isn't for them, like that may be true, But what I want is every kid to have the choice to
Mhm.
choose college or not, which hasn't been a real thing. But
Right.
to your point, when you talk about we need to take care of, if 60% or if that number shrinks to 50% or whatever aren't choosing, we've got to do a much better job of helping them build for their own future, right?
Exactly. And another important factor here that underlines all of this, again, is the issue of equity. That right now there's so much opposition to equity. I mean, again, no child left behind, when we look at the children that are being left behind, who are those children? Those are the children that predominantly have been marginalized and not given the opportunities that other children have had. And this is one of the things that we work with our superintendents to do. And you would think that this is something that everybody would jump on board and say, absolutely. Yet today, they're struggling with opposition even to do that. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have our best educational programs in this country are exclusive. And we're proud of that when they should be inclusive. Because what we're doing is that we're saying these are our best programs, these are our greatest programs, but they're only good for these students and not necessarily for these other students. You can't participate in these programs. And that can't be because these other youngsters that we are excluding from participating in these programs will never have the opportunity to succeed, to have the advantages that others have. And that's a reality. That exists in just about every school district. So we work with our superintendents to look at the data, to look at what's going on. It's amazing. I was the superintendent of schools in Fairfax County, Virginia, 10th largest school district in America.
Small little district in Northern Virginia. No one's heard of it. Keep going.
190,000 kids. But when I went into Fairfax, and I looked at our population and all of our schools, we had a substantial number of our students that were not performing well, that were failing, that were not getting the opportunities that so many of our other students were getting. And what I did there is that I created a system where I identified all of those schools. I provided those schools because equity is different than equality. When you talk about equality, you say everybody gets the same thing. Well, because your kids are doing great in McLean and Langley and all of the sections of Fairfax County that was middle class or higher. Yet the communities that were in impoverished areas of the county were not. Yet when given the opportunities, when given the resources, they performed better. This is not rocket science. It's a fact. And this is the kind of solution that we want to see implemented in all of our schools, because it will be better for society in general when we have all of our individuals that are trained, skilled, able to work effectively and earn a living. It'll erase many of the problems that our society is dealing with today.
So as we wrap up, I always offer an opportunity for our guests to share a piece of advice that you have for folks. And right now, we're at a place where the school year is starting. As we've talked, there's a lot of uncertainty. Will it close down? Will we go back to virtual? Who knows? What advice do you have for educators, educational leaders, as well as educators who are listening on approaching this uncertainty this year?
Well, what I've told our superintendents is that, and I refer to them as champions for children. We're not going to do that. Our children are going to wear a mask. And, because that is what will best ensure their safety and welfare. So I'm not going to ignore that. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And we're proud of those superintendents that are doing that. It's not easy in a world, but again, if you don't, then, what superintendent wants to have on their conscience that as a result of they're not doing the right thing, children in their community died as a result? Nobody wants that.
I agree. So last few questions, because we're trying to learn from everybody. Every leader, we believe, has some habits or disciplines that they use in their lives to be more effective. What's a habit or a couple of habits or disciplines that you do on a daily basis or even a weekly basis that you think are part of your success as a leader?
First and foremost, you have to take care of yourself. If you're not around, if you're sick, if you're weak, you're not going to be able to do what you want to do. So I work out every day. For many years, I was a runner. I would do 4-6 miles a day, 10 miles on weekends. I paid the price because as a result of that, I've had both hips replaced. So now I can't run anymore, but I still work out. I still do an elliptical, bicycle, swimming, all of the things that I can do. And that allows me to be strong. That allows me to be healthy. And that allows me to do what I do. I work easily 14-hour days on a regular basis, and I can do that. So that's important. Equally important is surrounding yourself with people that care about you, people that you love, people that love you. That kind of support allows you then, frees you to be able to do the kind of things that you can do. It also gives you the support to take risks when it's appropriate to take risks, to walk out on a limb when it's appropriate, because you know that if you fall, there are people there who will catch you. I learned that from my parents, actually. You know, I'm an immigrant. My parents were immigrant. I grew up on the west side of Manhattan, and I had parents that loved me unconditionally and gave me that support. And it was wonderful for those of us that have had that, to have that feeling that, you know, no matter what happened, mom and dad were always there for you. Even as I was an adult, mom and pop were always there for you. I do that now with my family, with all of my kids and all of my grandkids, provide them with that love and support. And as a result of that, they're grown up themselves to be successful, wonderful, loving individuals. So those are two for sure. You got to take care of yourself first and surround yourself with the kind of love and support that will allow you to succeed in whatever it is that you choose to do in life.
Well, especially for education leaders, we just talked about folks that are taking punches on a daily basis. If you don't have a strong network to validate you when you're upsetting a lot of other folks as you're trying to make the best decision to love and serve people, it becomes almost impossible, right?
Correct.
All right. So we also know that great leaders are generally readers. So what kind of reading habits do you have, or what books are some of your favorite books, or what authors are some of your favorite authors?
Well, I do a lot of technical reading, obviously, in terms of because of my job, a lot of the research, a lot of the things that I like to do. But I also like to mix it up so that I'm always reading some form of non-factual but fiction. I'm reading David Brooks is one of my favorite authors, for example. But I also love to read action kind of things, things that will take my mind off the work that I do, just kind of entertainment. So I mix the two. But most of my reading is just technical research, reports, all of these things that I have to read. But if I had the opportunity to sit back quietly and read a novel, I will do that by any number of authors.
What do you do to recharge? I had an interview, I don't know, a few weeks ago with Jeffrey Canada, who's someone I've looked up to for a long time. And he surprised me when he said for 25 years, he taught Taekwondo class, I think twice a week. And this is something you would never guess. And his whole point was like, getting ready, I just check out. I don't worry about all the other problems that we have in children's zone or anything else. I just go teach my class, and I'm thinking about it while I'm there. And then even when I leave for the next hour or so, I'm fully immersed in that versus all the other things that could be happening. I know you work out. Is there anything that you do to help? You said boating maybe it'd be one of the things that you do to help unplug.
Well, lately, one of the things that I've discovered is, I have these ear pods that I just put in my ear. Yep. And, Spotify, if you're familiar with that music channel, and I just lie down with those earbuds on, and for a half hour, I will play Spanish guitar. I will play love music from the 70s. I will play any of those nice and mellow sounds. And I just sit there, and it's a form of meditation. and I think of nothing. I'm just listening to the music, and in a half hour, when I, done, I feel recharged. I'm ready to go. It's not meditation, but for me, it's a great form of relaxation.
That's awesome. Well, Dan, we've had you here for an hour. This has been an awesome conversation. I am inspired by the work you and your committee have done around Learning 2025. I'm inspired as getting ready to talk to you, finding out from a number of folks that, again, all consistently said one thing, is that you're about action and execution. So I assume your organization is as well. And so it's an honor to be associated with you. And I wish you the best as you guys go fight for everyone in your Learning 2025 plan.
Well, thank you, Dustin. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you. And we are excited about our work. We're about action. It's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I hope our paths cross again soon. Thanks for making time for us today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.